So welcome to HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS and Windows 8. So we're going to actually spend the next 50 minutes talk about some of the development best practice tips you need to be aware of if you're interested in developing Windows 8 application. And then we're actually going to talk about how you can use HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, all the skills that you have. How many of you, okay, let me actually get some idea. How many of you are JavaScript developer? Very good. HTML5, CSS? Okay, wonderful. So make my job quite a lot easier. Let me introduce myself. My name is Doris Chen. I'm a technology evangelist at Microsoft. And then if, say, after the talk, you have some comments, feedback, or question, doris.chen@microsoft.com. That's my email address. And then for people interested in presentation, demos, a lot of other information, you want to learn more about Windows 8 development, HTML5, this is my blog address. So you could find a lot of information. And you could also tweet me, Doris T. Chen. Notice there's a T in the middle because somebody took Doris Chen, so I have to take Doris T. Chen. Okay. So let me introduce myself a little bit in case you didn't know. I worked for Microsoft for about 2 years. I'm focused on the web technology, HTML, JavaScript, and so on. So before with Microsoft, I worked with Java community for about over 10 years. I was a Java evangelist at Sun Microsystem. So web tier is always my focused area. So I'm really happy to talk about how you could leverage the skill set like HTML5, JavaScript to develop some cool application on Windows 8. Okay, so we actually have a pretty busy agenda. We have quite a few things we try to achieve in this 15 minutes. So first, obviously, very first thing is let's give some Windows overview, right? And then the focus here in this session is as a developer, as a web developer, what are the things you see which is different from Windows 8? What are the things you need to watch out, and what are the things you could totally leverage and make as much as possible in your development? So we're going to first start with that and then talk about some of the new features in HTML5 CSS3 feature in the IE10, and which I believe there's another session which is dedicated for that later on. And then we're going to talk just briefly about what is WinJS, because you probably heard about that, and the development tools you will be able to leverage. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time to talk about, what is the difference between a web application versus a Windows 8 application? What are the things you could totally leverage, and what are the things as a best practice you need to watch out? And a few particular things like a touch, controls, app bars, contract, those things are more integrated with Windows 8 platform. And it will give you quite a lot of resources, because I think this is 15 minutes, not going to really tell you everything. So resources are really important for you to get started with Windows 8 development. So let's first start with Windows 8. Now, you probably have seen this Bible picture a lot of other places. But really, for us as web developers, I think this is the area we're really interested in, right? So Windows 8 also, you could use any other language listed in this diagram. But for us, web developers, we already know HTML5, we already know JavaScript, we already know CSS. So there are actually two ways currently you will be able to do running on Windows 8. Now, people kind of confused about these two, so let me spend just a little bit of time talk about that. So if you talk about a desktop application, this is almost like a business as usual, like what you do with today's any web app running in IE browser, right? You still use HTML, JavaScript to develop application. That part unchanged. That's not something like a really that new. It will be some new features, but really not something that fundamental you need to learn. But the other part, perhaps, is more important or more interesting for us is here, which is leveraging the same skill set, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then develop Windows 8 application. Right. So this is actually the part we're going to concentrate on for today's talk. And then what you can see is you're using the same skill set, same language. We don't ask you to learn another totally new language. It's the same skill set, same language you already know. And then based on that, you will be able to make your app talk to what we call the Windows Runtime API, which will have quite a lot of things which we'll briefly cover in the later session. For example, communication data, the media and graphics, and some of the device, like you catch up a camera, catch up the video, take the picture, video and printing, and so on. And then again, this Windows 8 style application is a native application, whereas the application developed here, this is a web application. Right, so these are very two different type of application. So you probably still look a little puzzled because this is the first question people have. Let's say, hey, I'm already familiar with all the web application, right? I know web application is basically, you have multiple pages, you deploy it onto a web server, right? That's your web app. You're running in a browser, right? Now, this is still the same, but in addition to that, as a Windows 8 app, these other things are very different from the web application. Although both of them will be using the same language skill set to develop app, but as a Windows 8 application, it's actually stored locally on the computer, just like any native application, right? So it's not a web application anymore, it's a native application. And then it also has access to the underlying platform, like the runtime API and so on. Right. And also, among the Windows 8 application, you will be able to implement the shared information between the apps. Right. So these are the something sort of like different from the traditional web application. So I want to sort of just digest a little bit, so get some idea, and then we're going to move on to it. Right. Okay. So. The other question is, you get some idea about web application, Windows 8 application. Perhaps the question you probably will ask is, while I'm sitting here listening to you for 50 minutes, what's the motivation for me to develop a Windows 8 application? Right? That's a very legitimate question to ask. So I'm not a marketing person, I'm a technical person, but I think this perhaps will just give you some idea, right? So you see the number, this is from the IDC, the data of March 2012, and then the data shows we see the number of apps for Mac, for iOS, and for Android. And if you look at Windows 7 currently, there's 690 million users using that. And then all those users are going to migrate into Windows 8. So you think about close to 700 million users will need to actually use Windows 8 application. And then the Windows 8 app store is already open, right? So you could actually check in your app and make some serious money. Think about 700 million people is going to running on Windows 8. So a lot of opportunities there. And the other thing is, I probably want to start with revenue sharing in case you actually did write quite a bit of app for other OS. So it started with 70%, meaning you get a 70% and give another 30% to Microsoft. However, the revenue model changes a bit when your app is getting a little bigger. For example, once your app reaches 25K, which is pretty easy, not that hard, 25K revenue, then your revenue jumps to 80%. So you could get 80% instead of 70%. So if you look at that potential, there's a lot of, quite a big opportunity and quite a big gain versus the other OS. Okay. So hopefully you get some idea about why you need to develop Windows application. Hopefully that motivates you a little bit more. I'm actually going to start with a demo. So let's actually take a look at the Windows 8 new startup menu. This will be all touch-based, scrolling like this. It's a Windows 8 startup. All right, so you will be able to invoke a lot of applications like Internet Explorer, everything from the Windows 8. You could also, if you say, I'm a developer, I want to look into some of the user tool to develop the app, like what I'm doing. You could go to what we call desktop here. And then let me actually. Okay, so this is a desktop. Let me just get off the slide showing mode. And then what you will see here is this is probably a very similar like any other Windows desktop you're familiar with, right? So it's basically, it's kind of like a two-in-one. This is actually a prototype from Build last year. It's using Samsung Slate. It's, so you could see, you could have a tablet kind of based and also regular kind of desktop, sort of two-in-one. And then the difference here is with Windows 8, you don't really have the startup menu like what we have before. So instead, you actually have a starter like this. So you could go there, which is go to the front page. This will be your startup menu. So let me go back. So what you could see is the app store is already open, which is you could, if internet works fine, I could not connect to the internet for some reason. So you could go to the store and take a look. There's a lot of application already there. And also you could see, if you're scrolling around, you could see a lot of desktop regular application, like Office Suite or some of the development tools you may be interested, and it's all there. You could invoke them. Okay, so let me actually go back to the demo I tried to show you. This is, it's a color rope, and I hope the internet is working. So it says limited, so not quite sure. So, okay, let me, internet is always a challenge, isn't it? Okay, so let me see if I could connect to the, did you guys get a better luck with HTML Dev conference? It's not working? Okay. Okay, so in that case, then it might be an internet issue, so it's just not working. What I'm trying to show you here is you probably tried some OS, right? With color rope is a pretty famous one, especially for the kids to play. And then this color rope, if you look at the URL, www.cuttherope.ie, that's actually a URL. It's a web application. And we completely rewritten everything with JavaScript HTML5. And you could try this URL in any browser. It doesn't have to be IE. And what you will see is a version of color rope. And based on that, and too bad the internet is not working, what we did is we transformed using all the JavaScript, game engine, physics engine, and all the HTML, we transformed into a Windows 8 app, which is, I uploaded here. So this is color rope, right? On Windows 8, behind that it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So if we play with that, you will see everything is app-centric. Every single pixel is occupy the central space. It's not a web, right? You don't see any of the web URL or those things. So you could see we could actually play the game, right? I don't know if you hear the music, but I could hear some music. And then it's touch enabled. You could color rope. So not bad. Oh, 3,000. Oh, 5,000. Pretty good move. So I reached the very first one, and this is really color rope. It's a native application, Windows 8, but behind the code is HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. All right? So hopefully you will get some idea. Let's go back to the desktop and continue with our content. So what does I show you here is I just showed you an app which is completely developed with HTML, JavaScript. You could run it in any browser, right? And then you transform that into Windows 8. So the next I want to spend just a little time talk about, what are the features for IE10? Because IE10 will be the browser running on Windows 8, right? So you probably were wondering, what kind of new HTML, CSS feature we'll be able to use in IE10? So there's a lot of new features supported in IE10. So everything, when you see in blue label, these are the new features in IE10. And then everything else is already available in IE9. So if you use 7, IE9, that's actually all the other features already available. So let me just sort of point out a few new features supporting IE10. For example, we did a lot of work with the CSS3 support. So we have CSS3, 3D transform support, animation support, Flexbox, grid support, which will actually show you more demo if the internet is going back. We actually have quite a bit of cool demo things like CSS position the floats, which is called the CSS3 exclusions. A really nice feature. You will see that. Multi-column is another one. You could actually just play with the CSS3 feature, some of the attributes, to make your column have multiple column instead of just one column. And think about it. Normally, when you do that, you have to use JavaScript to do that. You have to do quite a lot of layout, right? Now, with the CSS3, you just play with some of the attribute. Just say column count equals 2 instead of 1. Then boom, become multiple column. So it's really a great supporting CSS3. And again, all the HTML CSS feature I'm talking about here are from W3C. Are totally the standard, compliant with W3C standard. It's not a IE or any Microsoft specific feature, right? So you will be able to see all the new feature from W3C. Also, there's a lot of file reader, HTML related kind of like a drag and drop form validation related feature supported. Also, if you look interested in local storage, IndexedDB and app cache, and all those local storage technique are supported there. Also, it supported the pointers with all different kind of input, and which we'll talk a little bit more later on. SVG filter is also supported in IE10, as well as I think a lot of people love WebSockets. Yes, WebSockets will be supported IE10, as well as web workers, which is basically providing sort of try to resolve single-threaded mode in the JavaScript programming, try to make it more concurrent, so you could actually invoke multiple web worker service to sort of resolve the concurrency kind of issue. So a lot of new features supported in IE10. Oh, one more thing I want to go back is all the features, all the new feature here would be supported by IE10's hardware acceleration. Because if you think about it, look at a modern browser, you look at the competition or whatever, the performance difference, you will see it's how well each browser could support hardware acceleration for different feature. That's actually make a big difference. And again, whatever web application running, the JavaScript is the same as you running in Windows 8, which is Chakra JavaScript engine. So if you have an app running on IE10 and it's running fine, you shouldn't worry about it. You could just transform these and then put it into Windows 8. That should be working because it's the same JavaScript engine running underneath that. Okay, so what are the new features for CSS we actually supported, especially in Windows 8? We use quite a lot for the 2D and 3D CSS transform, as well as we use a lot of animations and the transition features in the CSS3. Layout, this is something we'll spend some time. So we'll talk about how we're going to use grid layout and the Flexbox layout. And there's a lot of other things people already use, like a gradient, text shadow, and then if you want to make your content really flowing, like more fluid, that's what we say, we could actually using the multi-column hyphenations and the position to flow. So first thing I want to actually talk a little bit about is CSS median queries. So how many of you are actually familiar with CSS median queries? Okay, quite a lot of you. So median queries is really, I think, one of the coolest feature in CSS3. And then it's actually really, make everything is so easy to maintainable and to group into the particular way. So Windows 8 actually have 4 different view states, and they leverage the median query concept to implement your application. Because for any tablet, you know that there's a full view, right? And you could actually change your orientation. There's a portrait view, right? As well as in Windows 8, we will actually have another one called Snap and Field View. What does that mean? That means in Windows 8, you will be able to run in 2 applications at the same time. right? You make one is smaller, the other is a little larger. So one of them is your main one. For example, I could actually leave this snap view, say this part I could use as doing my development. But then I could use my snap view to take a look at the weather or take a look at the stock situation, right? So I could, when I do development, I still could take a look if I have some stocks, I need to do something about that. So two apps running at the same time on Windows 8. And then because of that, so we actually defined the smaller version is called snap view, and then the little larger version is called field view, right? So after we define all the view states, then we actually just use median query. This is a standard CSS3 feature, right? So we use median query, and the way we do it is we still call add a median screen. This is pretty typical in any of the CSS3, right? And then we actually defining different views because it's a little easier just to define different views, so we could have some default CSS support implement there, as well as obviously you could do fine tuning, adjust your look and feel for that particular view. So we actually have different views there for full screen, device portrait, snapped, and field, right? So you could see the diagram. This is what we sort of represents different view. Okay, so you're probably wondering, you say, could I actually just take a look at what it will look like? So what I'm doing here is I'm going to open, this is called Brand, and it's a free tool. It's an authoring tool for you to develop HTML, CSS kind of application. And then what I'm having here is I actually have it's an app called a memory game, and if over time we could play with that, it's basically try to find two matching images. But in this case, what I want to show you is this is what it look like in the regular, like what we call full view, right? And then if I want to change the orientation, right, I change the device to like this. Let me do it. So you will see the orientation change to the vertical view. And you do see the content changes a little bit in terms of where to put a button, the choice button, and all the layout for the images. It does look different, right? And as well as if you want to say, I want to make it a field view, right? What it will look like. So all those views, it depends on what you want to do, right? What will make the best sense for different size of that. So you would be able to use different, sort of regular, what we usually do to program different views under different kind of view state, right? So you could use tools to do that, and also, the idea here is you may want to omit something, right? Sometimes you may want to change the resolution of your picture, for example, for your image. Sometimes you may want to use a border at all. Sometimes you want to totally get of the captions, for example. And then the median query, basically, the idea here is give you a way to systematically implementing the look and feel depends on the device size, device resolution. For example, in this case, I'm talking about on a tablet. You could run it on a maybe mobile device, right? You could run it on a game console, or you could run it in a big screen TV. So all those things will require you to use some nice way to putting all the code together, depends on what you want, right? Pretty straightforward. Yeah. Okay. So next, let's actually spend a little bit of time talk about Flexbox and the grid. Now, Flexbox, how many of you heard about a Flexbox? Okay, quite a bit. So Flexbox, for me, is a very useful feature to especially doing your layout, because it gives you very easy way to actually align your vertical components or horizontal components really easily. Okay, so what we usually do is align the horizontal components. No big deal, right? We could align the buttons really nicely. But how well you could actually align the vertical components in your app? Totally doable, right? I agree. You could write a lot of JavaScript or whatever, work on your layout to make it really nice. But then how easy it is? Probably not that easy. But with Flexbox, you will be very easily to just change some of the parameter to make it work. Okay, so grid is another one. So grid, what we have here is, grid is just like a table, right? We're familiar with table, right? So every single page could be really, if you want to really do it, you could always sort of like compose as a grid, right? And you could actually change the matrix size, you could change the cell size, right? But the idea here is a grid, it's based on grid. So layout could always use a grid to do. So with the CSS3, you have quite a few like a nice attributes you could play with CSS Grid. For example, you could call display the grid, right? You could defining the grid columns, how many grid columns you want, how many grid rows you want, and you could also defining the size for each of the columns as well as each of the rows, right? Using fixed pixel size as well as fractional, right? Fractional is like a relative, whatever space left, I want to take that big. And then you could also defining, if I have like a 2x2 matrix like what I have here, I could also put the content into each individual cell, right? I could use, it's like a matrix, but instead of start with 0, 0, it's always from 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 2, right? So for each of them, you could say, for this grid column 2 and the row 2, which is here, this is what I want to have, right? So you could fit your content into it. Okay, so it's actually very straightforward to really use grid, and then so now the crucial thing is if the internet is back. So again, this is probably something I did when the internet is still here. This is what we call IE test drive. So if you want to take a look at the new HTML5 feature or CSS feature, it's called IE test drive. Just use that keyword, IE test drive. You go there, you will see a list of what we call demo specific, feature specific kind of demo. So each of those demo will actually show you how to implement a particular feature in the HTML5 and CSS3. So for example, if I'm interested, this is, you could see a lot of like HTML5 related demo as well as a graphical. There's Canvas, SVG, you know, all those things, video manipulation and so on. And then you could also see some browser specific. Okay, so one of the demo I want to show you is, I want to show you how we could actually play with some of the CSS3 feature. So let's actually take a look at the Flexbox layout. So what you can see is it's basically, it's a little like a toolkit, right? So you would be able to play with this little sliding things to choose different parameter for your CSS3, and all your code will be generated here, and all the look and feel will be on the other side. So you could use that to take a look. For example, I have 1, 2, 3. This is a Flexbox, so I'm doing vertical kind of alignment, but I could also change the flex align kind of parameter to put like in end, different parameter center, and then the stretch, you will see actually your components will be actually aligned with different things, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is you could actually play with the direction. So vertically, I have 1, 2, 3. How about I want to change the order of these 3 components? I could have the flex direction as row reverse. This is reversible, right? So you actually have a reverse 3 to 1. And you could also actually do it in a vertical way, just as simple as that. Put a thing called a column into this flex direction, and your components will become vertical. And then you could also change the order to like a column reverse to have different order. So isn't that cool? Yeah, pretty cool to change the CSS. And then we could also have some of the sample kind of Flexbox layout. So you could, if you like this layout, you could leverage that and go here to see whatever the setting is. And then again, you could actually change from the smaller setting as well as into a larger setting, right? All those things will change the size accordingly. So if we change it to a smaller setting, let's actually do it a little menu like this. And then if I go to item, and you will see, like for example, if I'm interested in box 3, I could actually change it to something like, instead of 0, I'm going to change it to 1. So box 3 is going to have a different flex number called 1, and then you will see this particular component is automatically take whatever the space left without you to calculating, you know, how much I have to sort of expand. Just by changing some of the parameter, everything will lay out really nicely, right? So this is the Flexbox. And then again, you know, feel free to play with that. It's online, and you could actually change all the parameters here and to get a best kind of layout you want. And what I do is I usually using the slide bar to getting the components and just simply copy and paste the code here into my CSS3. Isn't that easy? Okay, so next I want to try is I want to show you something on the grid. Okay, let's try it again with the grid. All right, cool. Verizon's working. All right, so very good. So grid, it's the same story, right? So we actually have grid columns for different columns, different rows, which you could actually play with that, right? So when you play with that, you could actually see different fixed size as well as relative size to do that. And you could play with the particular grid height and width. You could play with individual, like you could add a particular grid item. Or you could actually go with 9 by 9, 3 columns. This is a little nice kind of different layout for the grid, as well as some more interesting grid to play with that. And you could play with a very complex grid and go back to the beginning, and you will see all the what is the parameter to create such a grid, and then you could fill in content really nicely, as well as adjusting any of the size here to make it more interesting or more appropriate for your particular application. All right. So again, go to IE test drive to take a look. Now the other nice feature I want to see is, let's see if it's working. Is called floating floats. This is actually using CSS3 exclusions or the position flow. And then looks like it's gradually sort of like slightly getting there. It's just wait. OK, cool. So this is actually a project I did probably a few years ago. And I kind of failed the project. So the idea here is they wanted me to develop kind of like a company logo in the middle and then embed it in the text. And then do something like this. Isn't that cool? And then still get a real-time performance. So it is working. A few years ago, my project is working, but the performance is not that great. So at that time, I used, I don't know HTML, CSS, right? So at that time, I just used a JavaScript. So it's not really that great. And then, oops, interesting. Let me actually just, internet is back, that's why kind of rope is alive now. So, actually, you could actually play with a simple layout like this, multiple layout, which you have multiple layout, grid layout, and it doesn't matter what kind of layout you have at the background as a text. This is called position float kind of feature. You could play with a CSS feature. It's called CSS3 exclusions, and then you could do something really cool as this. So this is something, if you want to do some animation, if you happen to have some nice logo or some simple image you want to be, and it's touch-based, right? You could do all those things. You could use position float to do that. So the take here is, I'm just thinking, I overlooked CSS3 maybe a year or 2 years ago because I'm thinking I'm a developer, right? I'm thinking I'm more like sort of interested into the JavaScript. But actually CSS3 has big progress. A lot of things CSS3 feature is implemented by very professional, high-performance team, right? So why not just leverage the result they already have? They already implement a nice CSS feature. Why not just use them instead of implementing your own, right? All the things I show here, definitely you could use any other way to do that. But why not just use the easy way, right? So that's sort of like the takeaway I wanted you to keep in mind. OK, so let's actually go back. And talk just a little more about WinJS. So Windows.js is basically try to help you to have a better integration with Windows 8. And also, it will provide you some of the easy API for you to access. For example, we talk about how to do the namespace, right? JavaScript, think about namespace. How do we resolve the namespace issue in JavaScript, right? There's a lot of things like asynchronized way to do things called promise pattern, app model, navigation, data binding, little control, utility, and so on. All those things is implemented in WinJS. So in addition to all the nice HTML, CSS you're using today, it's totally fine. But if you want to take some advantage, make your life a little easier to integrate with Windows 8, perhaps you do want to look into WinJS just a little bit. OK, so I'm actually going to sort of change the gear a little bit because I'm not going to focus on how to show you all the WinJS API. That's not the main focus. But what I want to show you is, first of all, the development tool for Windows 8 is free, right? So if you go to this bit.ly Windows 8 download, you should be able to get a Windows 8 and then you should get what we call Express version. So for Windows 8 development, Express version is a free version. So Visual Studio 2012, this is a version to develop Windows 8 application. And then if you're interested in authoring too, right? So just like what I show you in the different layout, right? The portrait, then you could use brand. Brand is embedded in the Visual Studio. So you could open a project in the Visual Studio, and then brand, you could just open the HTML in brand. Brand is HTML CSS3 authoring tool. So you could use that tool to do a lot of things. And what's so cool about brand is, you may be interested is, it could also generate the dynamic content from JavaScript. And it could also play with the JavaScript testing. So you could actually go into what we call the interactive mode. So it's not just a regular static authoring tool. You could see how things changed with the JavaScript. You could see a lot of dynamic content as well. So if you get a chance, feel free to take a look. Again, this is a download link. Pay attention, it's case sensitive. Bit.ly link is case sensitive. All right, so, and then it's yours to keep. It's all free. Okay, so now I want to actually change the gear a little bit. I want to actually show you HTML5 app. Let me actually first clean up the app a little bit. This is a brand, so I don't need it for this demo. I'm gonna clean up. So what I'm having here is, I actually have an app totally developed in HTML and CSS. And this is something I did like a year ago. When I first started with HTML kind of video tag, I just thought it's kind of fun to do that. So here's what I do. I will briefly go over that. I have a video, HTML5 video. In order to make it cross different browsers, so I keep the video in two formats. One is MP4, one is WebM, so that you will be able to run in all major browsers, right? So, and I'm using just the video tag, HTML5 video tag, and make it autoplay. And then in this case, I'm actually playing with a mouse out, mouse over. So when the mouse over the video, mouse over the video, this video will keep on playing. When the mouse will be leaving the video area, then this video will stop playing. This is sort of like my control, right? And then on top of that, I would just say, why not just using some canvas? So I create a canvas. What I want to do is I want to actually adding some reflection into this video. So what I do is I go to here, and then just play with, grab the video tag, getting the canvas context, and then create the reflection. So here with this, I use a scale 1 to -1 to flip the video to create a kind of like a reflection effect. And then I play with a gradient. So you could use CSS or you could use JavaScript to make the gradient work, and adding different color from different color sort of like a range. And also I implement some event, which is a little like animation to sort of like set up the draw the video interval. In this case is I'm gonna just use a draw image, even though it's called draw image, it's the same thing for image as well as for video. So you could put your video, put your particular how big your video is going to be. And then you could actually also doing something called a fill rectangle to create some what we call fading kind of effect into it, right? So, and then this is 60 milliseconds. That's the interval I set up. So this is basically the implementation for me to create a reflection. And then last but not least is, I haven't tried any CSS yet, right? So for demonstration purpose, I keep everything CSS, JavaScript, HTML into this single file. So what I do is I actually use a font face. I want to use some non-traditional kind of what we call the good dog web font, wolf font, right? You probably hear about a wolf font, right, in CSS3, right? It's a very rich set of fonts. It's not just sort of traditional what you see it. You could use all kind of really interesting fonts. You could get it over the web to make your application more useful. And in the past, those wolf fonts, usually people have to generate image to do that. But now you don't have to do that. Those are true fonts, so you could leverage them. And then in this one, I set up a background with some kind of color, right, which I do it here. And I set up some title with that. And here is something I want you to pay attention is I actually play with the hover kind of effect. So I have a video, I have a hover effect. I play with a box shadow to create some shadow, as well as I also play with something we will call the border radius and the transition. So with the hover, I have the shadow, I have the border radius applying to that, as well as a transition into it. So, and then you could actually see what it look like. All right, so this is basically around 100, less than 100 lines of code. Everything is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it in a browser. So notice this is a browser application. So what you see here is it's a video playing with its refraction. And then when I actually come over, hover it over, we will see some box shadow kind of effect, right? And show some transition and so on. And when I get out, like I said, it will stop playing, right? Get it on, we'll play again, right? And the same thing, since somebody noticed I actually have a canvas hover kind of effect also in my CSS. So if I hover it over to canvas, so the canvas area, which is the reflection area, we're also applying the CSS effect onto it, right? Even though all those data is a reflection. So could anybody tell me why the video is not playing anymore? Exactly, because I'm outside the region, right? This is when video is playing. This is outside the video, so it's not playing, right? Pretty cool, right? All right, so very simple. Now this is a web application. This HTML5 web application, right? It's a URL here. So what if I do something not very nice, but let's try it. Let's do some experiment. So I say I'm going to actually develop a project. And then this time is going to be, I have a different templates. It's a blank application for Windows 8. And you could see Windows 8, you could use JavaScript, you could use XAML, you could use some other different sort of like a language to do that. So in this case, I'm going to stay with JavaScript. So you could have different layout to start with, like a grid layout, split layout, fixed layout, as well as a navigational kind of layout. But in this case, I'm going to keep things very simple, just have a blank layout. So with a blank, basically means nothing's there except a little, just a blank kind of like a background. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to the project, which I have that video. Make it a little bigger or smaller. First, let me actually figure out where is the particular, okay, I know where it is. Okay, let me actually go to that web project I created. And then go to my, here. So these are all the video resource, the project I just showed you, the default, like a default file, everything, right? So I'm going to be really brave here. I'm going to actually grab the whole thing and then copy it over there, right? And then it says, oh, maybe some default thing you want to replace. Yes, want to replace it. OK, now I just dragged all the web content I did, right? Bring it over to a Windows 8 MPD project, right? Let's see if it's going to work. So I click F5 function key, which is run the project. Wow. It looks like it's working. Even the touch is working, right? All the shadow, all the transition, and then when I leave it out, it stops playing. And then all the reflection is also working. Pretty cool, right? I didn't really change anything. It's the same web code I showed you before, right? And now I could do something like this. But is it a good Windows 8 application yet? Anybody say yes? No? It is a Windows 8 application, right? Very good. OK, so obviously, this is what we call single-page application, which is a single kind of web page. This is probably will be the most straightforward way to transform into the Windows 8 application, right? So it's there. It's running, but it may not be that great yet, right? So next, I want to actually spend a little bit of time to, let me actually stop debugging and go back to the slide, and we will actually continue from there. So very good point to sort of continue with the web and Windows 8. So we just show you something really easy. It's a web application, and then just sort of drag it into MPD Windows 8 app. You could make it work, right? what I want to share with you is all the web skill set is using. You could also use a web services you're running like what you're doing in the past. And you could also use jQuery. Yes, jQuery is supported. You could use that. The things may not be really working that well is the local context versus the web context. So what we do here is we're also doing everything in a web context, which is totally fine. You could use iframe, everything to do that. But because of that, if you want to access the WinJS, we talked about those nice features before, then you wouldn't be able to do that. So there's a lot of like the WinJS, all those things, you wouldn't be able to access that. So in a way, when you do your web application, you need to watch out. If it's absolutely for you to use iframe, that's one thing. Second thing is you want to make sure once you use iframe, then you cannot access some of the WinJS library. Okay, so I think I need to wrap up, but I will share the slide with you later on in my blog. And this is the just one page to show you how you could actually getting all the difference between the web application and Windows 8. And if you have my slides, you have all the link. And then what I want to actually show you next is I'm going to actually do fast forward so that you will actually see what other things you need to do. So afterwards, because I don't really have time, seems like I'm running out of time. Yes, afterwards what you need to add is you need to add things like best practice. For example, use a namespace so that your JavaScript method function could be used anywhere. Because in JavaScript, it's always global, right? So you could use namespace to define your unique way and getting the scope of JavaScript correct. And then adding the sort of like a touch. A lot of times, if you're using nice JavaScript, whatever, with a web application, touch is there. But then with nice Windows 8, like a pointer touch, which actually I will introduce my colleague Jeff has a session on touch, how to implement that. And then you probably want to implement something called app bar. And then, for example, if we go to, this is IE version, right? And then you could actually take a look. These are your app bar, right? This is what app bar you could do. And then these are what we call the charm bar. So you could do, I want to share this application with a mail to, with some people to, or some other sample to, right? And then you could also use the search button, right, to search where is this IE, right? So all those things you probably need to add it into that particular video reflection, and then that will make it a good Windows 8 app. Okay, so I will just cut it short to the resource page. So again, use the link I give it to you, so you will be able to download Windows 8 and other tools. And you could also look at some of the things like the app generation to get a 30 days free consultation. And thank you very much.